So your husband or wife passes away. What's your Social Security check? What happens to the Social Security? That's what we're going to answer in today's video. So Tom, why are we making this video? Why is this the subject is so important today?
Yeah, I mean, we're making this video because if I have a couple here, when the first spouse passes, they are thrown into a crisis, right? That is, logistically it's difficult, emotionally it's difficult. Things are just hard. And the last thing you want to be thinking about at the time, or the last thing you are thinking about at the time, is what does this mean for my Social Security check? So we want to do the video today to really walk you through what that impact means, right? When the spouse dies, what happens to their check? And more importantly, how does that relate to the spousal check? And I also want you thinking about this if you're both still alive. I mean, if you had a spouse that just died, this is really important for you right now. But if you're both still alive, I want you thinking through this because this impacts the surviving spouse, right? One of you is likely going to die first. And that you need to think through what happens to the surviving spouse. And that should inform a piece of the decision when you're filing Social Security. So hopefully this is helpful. I will also tell you, if you go to Social Security, if you called up Social Security and ask them this, they are not going to be able to walk you through how this works, unfortunately. And I can give you story after story where people have gotten bad advice, wrong advice. So again, hopefully this gives you some information of how this works. So let me bring up the show notes. You can find this below our video. They're also on our website at cardinalguide.com. We have the board in this flow chart that we'll walk through in a second. And then we have sort of in words, more description of how the flow chart works. But I think that will make a lot more sense once we go through this. So let me turn it back to Hans and then we'll jump right in here.
Okay. We get calls from widows or widowers all the time. And, we do our best to help them through this. I just want people to know that even if you're not in a crisis, you're both still alive and you're collecting your checks and you want to talk about this. What Tom said about calling Social Security really doesn't do planning. They don't give you advice over what decisions to make. So, our phone number is right on the board. I mean, if we're here, we work in all 50 states in the District of Columbia, and we are here to answer questions, and we'll do that. And especially if you're, a widow or widower, and you're sorting through benefits, we're here to help you, and so give us a call. Now, I want to point out a couple things before Tom gets into this flow chart. I want to make this simple. If you're watching this video, you are both collecting Social Security, husband and wife, you're already getting your checks, and you want to know from a planning perspective, and we're going to want to help you through this, what's going to happen when the first one of you dies? What's going to happen to the Social Security check? And now you've only got one person living, and I'm going to tell you that the larger of the two Social Security checks continues, the smaller check stops. It's just that simple. So the rest of this, I want you to listen to the rest of this so you get a general understanding, and that's buried in there, but it's simple. So that smaller Social Security check is going to stop, and it doesn't matter who passes away, whether it's the person getting the smaller check or the person getting the larger check. The small one goes away, large check lives on. Okay. Second point before Tom gets talking. With divorce is you need to be single or not remarry before age 60 if you're going to claim on your ex-spouse. So two people get divorced. They're both 52 when they get divorced. And then now one of them, probably the larger earner, passes away years later. So the widow is going to be eligible to claim the survivor benefits on the one that died, the ex that died, so long as she or he did not remarry before 60. And then if they file right at 60 for these survivor benefits, they're going to be reduced. Whereas if they wait till they're 67 or their full retirement age, then they're going to get the full survivor benefit. So I'll let Tom get into the details of that. I wanted to make these 2 points before we get into the chart. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are both important things to understand. And so the chart really gets into sort of, and this is a common question I've gotten, is like, what happens if I'm delaying Social Security and I pass away before starting, right? So we'll get into all the examples here, but let's start at the first part of this board. So if we look at it on the left side, you really have sort of two categories. And so the first option is deceased, the person who died did not file for benefits. So that's the first category we'll go over. And the second one is they've already filed for benefits. So let's start at the top. This is assuming the person who died had not filed for benefits yet. They were living on, they had something happen, whatever it is, and then they hadn't filed yet. So now we get into the first question we get into is, did they die prior to their full retirement age? And again, that age, we have other videos where we walk about what that age is. If you were born after 1960 or after, that age is 67. If you were born prior to that, it's 66 and some amount of months, depending on the year you were born. You can look that up. It's right on your Social Security statement. So the question, though, is did they die before the full retirement age or after the full retirement age? So let's go with the first one. Let's assume that they died before they hit their full retirement age. Now we get over into the next one. So now we're talking about the survivor benefit, the surviving spouse. What benefit are they eligible for? And they are eligible for the deceased, the person who died, their full retirement age benefit. So let's say my retirement age is 67. Let's just say my benefit then is $3,000 a month, just as an example. And I died at, I don't know, 66. And my spouse, Chelsea, she's going to claim my benefit. She is eligible up to that 3,000, even though I didn't make it to full retirement age. Another critical age, though, and this is true for all the benefits we're going to go over. So I'll make the point once, but it applies to all of them. Is it also matters how old the surviving spouse is when they try to file for their spousal benefit. So in my example, let's say Chelsea is going to file the spousal benefit and she is filing prior to her full retirement age. So let's say she wasn't yet 67. Well, now they're going to take my full retirement age benefit that she's eligible for, but they're going to reduce it down based off her age. So that's an important aspect there. And that's across all of the benefits. So if you're a surviving spouse and you're filing for any amount of benefit prior to your full retirement age, there will be some reduction. You're not going to get the full benefit. Assuming you're at your full retirement age, you're going to get the full benefit that we'll go over in the rest of the examples. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's go to the next one. So now let's assume that the person who died after their full retirement age. So maybe they were planning on waiting until 70, the maximum age they could wait to get their Social Security check, but they died prior to getting there. What the deceased spouse is eligible for under the spousal benefit is they are eligible for the amount that the deceased spouse would have been able to get on the date of death. So let's say they made it to 69, they were planning on waiting until 70, and then they died. The deceased spouse would be eligible for that age 69-year-old benefit, again, reduced based upon if they're filing prior to their full retirement age. One other point I will make is this is really assuming that the survivor benefits alone is not higher than what they're going to get under the survivor benefits. So let's say Chelsea had worked her whole career and we had equal earnings, and she was filing her own check, and her own check was higher than my survivor check. This doesn't really come into play that much. There's some examples I might get to later in the video that maybe that still comes into play, but this is assuming that the survivor, the spouse who's still alive, his check is lower than what the benefit would have been under the one who deceased. So let me stop there and let Hans respond to sort of this first half of the board here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of all the people, and it's really you, Tom, that have helped widows, primarily widowers as well, where the deceased had not filed for benefits. Now, the widow who's still working or just retired, and then she's sitting there perplexed, like, what do I do? And it's important because there's an added element is she can get his check now, perhaps at a reduced amount because she's not at full retirement age yet. I'm thinking about one specific example. And she can file against his check, but if she does it in the proper way, her check can continue to grow, and then at 70, she can flip them. And I know I'm going to get some people writing in. You used to be able to do that. You can't anymore. Da, da, da. You can still do that when it's a matter of death. Um, so, because we've done this for several people since that law change. So I'm going to push it back to you to continue on with the chart, Tom.
Yeah, just on that example that Hans mentioned, this is an important thing. It's called a restricted application. I don't think you should try this on your own because Social Security offices will even tell you, and I've had them tell people, oh, you're no longer allowed to do this, which in most situations, that's true. It used to be that everyone could do these restricted applications. They changed the law several years ago. But what is still preserved in the law is when you are doing this restricted application and you're claiming a benefit, because of the other spouse being deceased. That's a critical point, is if they are deceased, you can still claim the deceased survivor's benefit, your survivor benefit, while you delay your own benefit to age 70. So again, if you have questions on about that, give us a call. We can help walk you through that. Another point that I will make too is if you are claiming any amount of benefits, whether it's survivor benefits, whether it's your own benefits, and you are under your full retirement age and you are still working, again, critical point there. If you're still working, you have this earnings test that you have to meet. So if you earn above certain thresholds, they will withhold benefits. So again, the claiming strategies are complicated. Today's video is not going to get into every single iteration of this that possibly exists. So with these rules being complicated, tread carefully. Just don't go start doing stuff because you watch one video. I would encourage you to reach out to us, reach out to someone else that's maybe knowledgeable on this to make sure you're doing this properly and you're getting the benefits that you're eligible for. So let me get to the second half of the board. Now we're getting into examples where the deceased person had already filed for benefits. So they had already filed and then they passed away. So now we get to the first question is, did they file prior to their full retirement age or after their full retirement age? So let's assume they applied to before they had started or before they got to their full retirement age. We get over to the next box. And so what the spouse is eligible for as the spousal benefit is the higher of the actual deceased benefit. Again, these are all reduced based off their own filing age, the survivor benefit, but we'll ignore that for a second. So it's the actual benefit or 82.5% of the deceased full retirement age benefit. So again, it gets a little bit complicated. I don't want to get into too many examples on that one. But if you file prior to your full retirement age, your spouse, your surviving spouse, is eligible to either the amount that you got or some reduced amount of that full retirement age benefit. Again, all reduced based off the surviving spouse's age when they file. The next example is they filed on or after the full retirement age. So they got to that age or later, and then they filed. Well, now the deceased spouse is eligible for the amount that they were getting. Essentially, what that amount is they were getting, that's what they would get. Again, adjusted based off the survivor's age when they file. So again, as you can tell, it's complicated, right? There's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of ages to know about how old you are, how old your spouse was, when did they file, when did they not file, are you still working? There is a lot of factors that goes into this decision. And so you need to really think through what all these options are available. And I also want you thinking through what these options mean for your spouse. If you're thinking about filing now, what impact does that have on my spouse if I were to die, right? What benefits are they eligible for? One of the main points that Hans made earlier is if you're both already on Social Security, you have both filed, you're getting a check, that lower check is going to stop when the first one dies, regardless of who passes away. So again, you need to understand that too. So, I could go on and on all day about Social Security and all the intricacies of how these work. It's complicated. You're not going to get this level of advice from Social Security Administration, unfortunately. So you need to work with someone like us who understands how this works to know what benefits you're eligible for and what benefits you should file for, and also the timing of that. When should I file for those benefits? Do I do it now? Do I do it later? And how that impacts the overall plan.
Okay. What we want you to get from this is it's a big part of the planning process is what's going to happen to my Social Security check when my spouse passes away. And if you're both getting checks, like a lot of people that come into us, is pretty simple. Is we need to plan for the reduction of income of the smaller check going away when a person dies. When you've got somebody that hasn't filed for their benefits, or I guess it goes either way, and then you're a recent widow or widower, then it's a pretty hard time, Social Security office does anyhow, of telling you what you're eligible for. They're just going to come up with a number. And we think that you still have some options and some things to consider, like whether you're still working or not, how much your check is, whether you're going to file a restricted. So there's a bunch of decisions that have to be made. We're going to suggest is that you call us. We'll be happy to help you out. So in terms of comprehensive financial planning, what have we talked about today? Well, we've obviously covered Social Security. We haven't talked about long-term care. We haven't talked about IRA, 401k. We've talked the whole show about income because we're going to look at your other income that you have available. Sometimes when a recent widow or widower, they're able to create enough income either from a job or from their investments or their 401k that they can afford to wait on the Social Security till they're at least full retirement age. So that's a factor when we're planning for your income. We've kind of shown you how estate planning works with Social Security. The only thing it's going to do is for the surviving spouse, and we haven't really talked about taxes all today. So I want to bring Tom back on. I'm Hans Scheil.
And I'm Tom Griffith.
And we thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.